Okay, welcome to the next quarter, the summer quarter. And in this class, this Daniel class, we're going to cover chapters 7 through 12. Although we're going to spend a little bit of time at the start of this lesson, just finishing up lesson number 6, chapter number 6. Carrie will do that in just a few minutes. And then I just want to mention that Tammy is now the class assistant, and I believe she may have any announcements that you want to share right now.
Yes, thank you, Larry. First, hi, everybody. I'm Tammy Rhodes. For those of you who don't know me, and like Larry said, I'm going to be serving as the class assistant. Zoom has a chat feature, as some of you know, most of you know, so feel free to use that if you have any questions about the class. So that's the first thing. The other thing is, and most of you did this and I appreciate it, when you sign in to Zoom, use a recognizable first and last name because I'll be recording attendance and that helps me to know who's here. So that would be great. And if you have family members who are joining with you as well, but I can't see them on the screen or I don't see their name, just shoot me a chat there in the chat room and just let me know who the other family members are so that I can mark them as present as well. Let's see. When Larry starts to teach, please mute your mics so that there's no background noise or any type of feedback that would disrupt his teaching time. So we would appreciate that. I'll let you guys decide whether you want to have your video on or not, but that's completely at your discretion. And if we have any visitors with us, please, again, shoot me a chat there in the chat room and just let me know your name. And if you would like to be added to our Hope Book database, please let me know that too. Okay, so I think that's about it. And again, if you have any questions or concerns, just pop them over in the chat. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Tammy. Oh, I do want to mention, if you want to ask questions during the teaching time, just unmute yourself and to ask, because I or Carrie will not always be able to see what's in the chat. At least not in real time. So with that, I'm going to share the notes for chapter 6, and then Carrie's going to spend a few minutes finishing up that chapter, and then we'll go on to chapter 7. So just give me one moment to share the notes. Here. So you should be able to see the notes now. And Carrie, you can begin.
Okay. I'm just going to give a quick whirlwind through 6. I know some of you, I believe, are new. We started 6, and I'm sure, I'm assuming, might be too much of an assumption, I'm assuming most of you are familiar with this story of all. To just kind of overview, we have the other presidents or rulers that were co-rulers are going to be in charge of the satraps with Daniel. They don't like what he's doing. They approach the king. I believe they kind of butter the king up. They, "O king, live forever," and they asked that a command or an edict would be put out that anybody who doesn't worship Darius as God for 30 days shall be thrown into the lion's den. So the king, I guess, thinks for various reasons, he's either his pride or he thinks it's going to help unite the kingdom. The Medo Persians have just taken over. Whatever reason, he goes along with it. Daniel knows this. He continues to pray, and one of the quick things we want to note is that these men that came together, these satraps and whatever, probably the other two presidents or chiefs that were over the satraps, knew or suspected or believed that Daniel would continue, even after this edict went out, that he would continue to do exactly as he did. This is a great testimony for Daniel. So Daniel does pray. They come to the king. Instead of, "O king, live forever," the first words out of their mouth is in verse 12. "Did you not sign an injunction that any man should make a petition to any god or man besides you, O king?" You can kind of see their heart. Look at what they're putting first. They're holding the king accountable. So the king, obviously, Darius, has an affection, and I believe it's not just he sees Daniel as a competent leader. I think he sees more than that. I believe there's a relationship between these two men. They come again in verse 15 after the king has done everything he can, and at sunset, typically the execution had to be carried out. And the king has looked at, we don't know what he's done, but he's tried to find a way to release Daniel from this edict. He finds none. They come to him in verse 15, first words out of their mouth: "Recognize," or it could be translated even, "Know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or statute which the king establishes may be changed." And just one other quick note. We notice, and this kind of keeps it in with the idea of Nebuchadnezzar was the king of gold. He was the head of gold. And we remember when we looked at that, and all the metals kind of went down in price or preciousness. And the king Nebuchadnezzar was in charge. He made the rules. He broke the rules. And here we see a falling, and the king is in charge to a large degree, but he's also liable to what the injunction is. And you see that the chiefs or whatever rulership, however it evolved over the centuries, also holds the king accountable and somewhat has an authority. And that is kind of the fallenness. And we see that played out even here. The king, they tell him, "No, O king, you can't change this injunction." So then we move to verse 16. There's one thing I want to point out real quick. The king gave orders to Daniel that it was to be brought and cast into the lion's den. And the king spoke to Daniel, "Your God, whom you constantly serve, will himself deliver you." Now, it could be, "May your God." Either way, he believes Daniel has been a witness to him, both in word and deed. He constantly serves him. He's been observed to do this. Again, he's such a model for complete godliness besides Jesus Christ as we're ever going to see. Daniel is such a good example for us. His heart and his mind are focused on the kingdom. The edicts, notice that they seal Daniel's put into the lion's den. They seal it with the king's ring and the noble's ring. Again, we see the two powers here. One is a lesser power, but a power nonetheless. Again, with Nebuchadnezzar in his time, I doubt the nobles would have sealed this den with their signet ring. It would have been just the king's. And it's just an example, again, of the ultimate rule is to have a sovereign king. We know that there's not going to be a good sovereign king until Jesus Christ comes and rules. He's the only one who can do it, right? He's the only one who'll do it in the right way, with thinking of others as well as himself. So the king moves on. He goes back to his palace. He fasts. He doesn't have any entertainment brought to him. He's concerned for Daniel. He wants Daniel. He returns to the lion's den early the next morning, and his voice is troubled. You can see there's more of a relationship. It's not just a practicality of Daniel's a good man and he wants to install him back to his position. Then he says, in a troubled voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, whom you constantly serve, has he been able to deliver you from the lions? Again, where does Darius get this? He says he's a living God. He constantly serves him. This has to be from Daniel's witness, both again in word and deed. Again, in contrast, O King, Daniel speaks, O King, verse 21, live forever. And these words are so important. My God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth, and they have not harmed me, inasmuch as I was found innocent before him, that is, before God. And also towards you, O King, I have committed no crime. Again, you can see people's, if we listen, a lot of times we see people's hearts, don't we? What they put first. He doesn't say, I'm innocent, I didn't commit any crime. He says, against you. It's personal. He wants to honor Darius as a person and as a king. I believe that's put forth here. So they pulled Daniel up out of the lion's den. Verse 24. The king then gave orders, and they brought these men who maliciously, or you could use the word, it could be translated slander, is another. They slandered him, and this is obviously recognized, and maliciously accused Daniel. And they cast let me try that again. The king then gave orders, and they brought those men who had maliciously accused Daniel. And they cast their children and their wives into the lion's den. And they did not reach the bottom of the den before the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. So we see that the lions were ready to feed, that this angel came and stood before Daniel. Not only did he shut their mouths, he also kept their claws and everything else. You can see God is sovereign. We know this, and we believe this. We're not like the ones who don't have faith and are questioning how Daniel could have escaped this. We know that God intervened, and we know he can intervene. And he may or may not intervene for us. Certainly lots of martyrs died, but the important thing is that we know that God is sovereign. And then we know that there is a bigger plan. And that is our focus. The kingdom, not this world. Verse 25. Then Darius, the king, wrote to all the peoples, nations, and men of every language who were living in the land, may your peace abound. Sounds like it's a Middle Eastern peace. It's such a shalom, right? With the Hebrew, peace, peace. People are always looking for peace, and God is the God of peace, right? I make a decree that in all the dominion of my kingdom, men are to fear and tremble before the God of Daniel. Again, thinking of Proverbs, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Proverbs 1:7. it sounds like Darius is inspired here. He could be writing proverbs in a song. Let me continue on. For he is the living God and enduring forever, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed, and his dominion will be forever. Again, look at the contrast, and we've been talking about this, and these were the visions we looked at with the four kingdoms, right? The image, the head of gold, the breast, the arms, the thighs, the legs, the feet. We saw the four kingdoms of men. And look at the contrast here. Even Darius speaks of, and his kingdom will endure forever. And that needs to be our focus. Needs to, especially in these times, it seems so appropriate. God's kingdom is being built. Even though we see chaos and everything else, things are moving towards God's kingdom, not man's kingdom. Because we know that man's kingdom is going to come to its end, and it's going to end in destruction. Verse 27, he delivers and rescues and performs signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. Who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions? So we see this. I mean, Darius is even talking about this is the God of heaven and earth. Remember, God uses, and even in our times and all times, God uses the saved and the unsaved as well. We see this over and over again. We think of the high priest during the time of Jesus' time. He said, it's better that one man that should die than the whole nation perish, right? He was speaking prophetically, and even though he was totally against God and his plan, and he was going to be part of God's plan to bring Jesus to the cross. So God is sovereign over all, heaven and earth. Who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions? He can work individually. He can save us, and we know that we are saved. We may not be saved out of illnesses, accidents, all that here, but we are being saved to an eternal kingdom, the one that's going to last, and that's our hope. Just one quick thing, I'll finish up. 28. So Daniel enjoyed success in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Larry has a note here, and if you are with us, the great debate is, because we just don't know. There's no extra biblical evidence. Is Darius and Cyrus the same man? Are they different men? Larry and I go with a lot of the commentators. We believe they are different people. But the point is, I want to make out of this is that we know that God has inspired this word. We know that when the evidence comes, it will be revealed that this Darius is not an incorrect statement. We feel confident it'll be revealed. He was either another name for Cyrus, almost like Herod or Pharaoh or something like that, or he was an appointed ruler over a particular part of the kingdom that Cyrus gave him power to rule over. The point is, though, Daniel succeeded and prospered, but if you read through this, I don't think you can help but miss. You never seem to see Daniel. To Daniel, this is just another aspect of it. He's blessed that he's able to live in a comfortable position, but his focus is, you don't see his focus on this at all. even in chapter 5, when Belshazzar, with the handwriting on the wall, in 17, he doesn't. He's had a lot. He's had a long years of relationship with Belshazzar. When his handwriting on the wall comes, Belshazzar says, "Oh, I'll give you robes and rings and this and that." And in 17, he says, "Keep your gifts for yourself and give your rewards to someone else." I mean, that's kind of Daniel's heart, because he's about to pronounce judgment, God's judgment on Belshazzar. He sees the bigger picture. You have mocked God, and now payment is going to come, even this night, right? And so I would just remember that Daniel enjoyed, it was a blessing, but his real blessing was in following God. So I'll end with that. Any quick questions? Any comments? Feel free at this time. Okay, well then, Larry, we're going to transition into 7, and so Larry will take over from here.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Carrie, for that. Okay, now we're going to transition to the second quarter of the class, which is chapter 7 through 12. And so we're going to begin chapter 7 today. And this is a vision, a prophecy. And so what I want us to do is to read through this chapters to get the overall context of the passage. And then we'll go through it in more detail. So beginning with chapter 7, verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream, a vision in his mind as he lay on his bed. And then he wrote the dream down and related it to the following summary of it. Daniel said, I was looking in my vision by night, and behold, 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And there were 4 beasts were coming up from the sea, different from one another. The first one was like a lion and had the wings of an eagle. I kept looking until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a human mind was given to it. Behold, another beast, a second one, resembling a bear, and it was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth. And thus they said to it, Arise, devour much meat. In verse 6, after this I kept looking, and behold, another one, like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. And after this I kept looking in night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrifying and extremely strong. And it had large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And it was different from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. While I was comprehending the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them. And 3 of the first horns were pulled up by the roots before it. Behold, This horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boast. Then verse 9. I kept looking until thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His vesture was like white snow, and his hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was ablaze with flames. Its wheels were a burning fire. A river of fire was flowing and coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands were attending him, and myriads upon myriads were standing before him. The court sat, and the books were opened. And I kept looking because of the sound of the boastful words which the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain, and its body and it was destroyed and given to the burning fire. As for the rest of the beast, their dominion was taken away, but an extension of life was granted to them for an appointed period of time. And then I kept looking at the night in visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming. He came up to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and men of every language might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away. And his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. Verse 15. As for me, Daniel, my spirit was distressed within me, and the visions of my mind kept alarming me. I approached one of those who was standing by and began asking him the exact meaning of all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. These great beasts, which are 4 in number, are 4 kings who will arise from the earth. But the saints of the highest one will receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, for all ages to come. Then I desired to know the exact meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from the others, exceedingly dreadful, in his teeth of iron, his claws of bronze, in which devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And the meaning of the 10 horns which were on its head, and the other horn which came up, and before him 3 of them fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth uttering great boast, and which was larger in appearance than its successors, than its associates. I kept looking, and behold, that horn was waging war against the saints and overpowering them, until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was passed in favor of the saints of the Most High. And the time arrived when the saints took possession of the kingdom. Thus he said, that 4th beast will be a 4th kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms, and it would devour the whole earth and tread it down and crush it. As for the 10 horns, one out of this kingdom, 10 kings will arise, and another will rise after them, and he will be different from the previous ones and will subdue 3 kings. And he will speak out against the Most High and wear down the saints of the Highest One. And he will intend to make alterations in times and in law, and they will be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. But in verse 26, but the court was set for judgment, and his dominion will be taken away, annihilated and destroyed forever. And then the sovereignty, the dominion, and the greatness of all the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of the Highest One. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all the dominions will serve and obey him. At this point, the revelation ended. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts were greatly alarming me, and my face grew pale. But I kept the matter to myself. Okay, so that is the vision of chapter 7. And I'm going to share the notes for this one. Just give me one moment to do so. Okay, let me okay, this is lesson 7. Okay, let's do a brief introduction. Now, chapters 7 through 12 comprise those 4 visions. The first vision is in chapter 7. The second vision we'll see later is in chapter 8. There's a third vision in chapter 9. And then the fourth vision comprises chapters 10, 11, and 12. Now, J. Vernon McGee calls Daniel 1 through 6, he calls it the historical night with prophetic light. Then he calls Daniel chapter 7 through 12, the prophetic light in the historical night. So the visions of chapters 7 and 8 contain much more what we call apocalyptic genre as compared to the dreams of chapters 2 and 4. We have already seen a few elementary examples of apocalyptic symbolism in chapters 2 and 4 within the dreams of Nebuchadnezzar. Now, this genre contains these general characteristics. Apocalyptic prophecy is, first of all, it is prophecy. And prophecy is a revelation given by God through a mediator, such as an angel, to a seer, such as a prophet, concerning future events. Apocalyptic prophecy reveals what has once been hidden or unknown. And apocalyptic prophecy is revealed in dreams and visions. Now, it is distinguished from normal prophecy or regular prophecy in that there's a preponderance of symbolism or numerology, but the symbols are usually identified in context or in previous revelation. Apocalyptic literature is typically not allegory. Many details are included, but are not interpreted, only to progress the vision. So everything does not always have a meaning. It's just there to help tell the narrative. Now, regular prophecy can also have symbols, but it is a preponderance of symbols that gives identity to apocalyptic prophecy. Now, there's not always a clear line, a clear mark of demarcation. It's not always clear what is normal prophecy and what is apocalyptic prophecy, but think of this as a continuum. And this prophecy is given during periods of persecution or historical crisis. The major theme of this type of prophecy or message is the eschatological triumph of the kingdom of God over the kingdoms of earth. That is, it concerns end time events. Also, in this type of prophecy, we might even get a glimpse of God. So think about that for one moment. And then apocalyptic visions, we unveil the future for the comfort and encouragement of the saints during their time of need. Is given for our comfort. Now, biblical apocalyptic should be understood as an actual account of what the writer saw or heard. Is not to be seen as some sort of coded language with the intent to conceal the true meaning. Okay. And the chief and principle of interpretation is still valid, except the plain sense of the text, unless there's good reason to adopt some other meaning. And with all prophecy, we can expect a literal and complete fulfillment. Hence, there is no room in the end for speculative interpretations. And most of what we call apocalyptic prophecy is found in the books of Daniel, Ezekiel, and Revelation. And also, I just want to mention that there are several examples of extra biblical Jewish apocalyptic literature, such as in the writings of the Qumran community and the Essenes sects during the intertestamental period. Are there any questions so far? Okay. Well, let's begin with verse 1, and this gives us a date of this vision. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions in his mind as he lay on his bed. Then he wrote the dream down and it related the following summary of it. Now, Daniel states that this vision is to the first year of Belshazzar. What that means is this places this vision before the events of chapter 5 and chapter 6. Now, Belshazzar always reigned as co-regent with his father Nabonius, who was ruled from 556 to 539 BC, a period of 17 years. We know that Nabonius was absent from Babylon for the last 14 years. Hence, Belshazzar would have been the de facto king beginning in about 553 BC. So this vision would be about 553 BC. And what we have here is a summary of the visions or the visions that Daniel saw, not necessarily all of the details that Daniel saw. And also, here's the first instance in the book of Daniel that Daniel is actually writing the book. But it's always been the clear testimony of Jewish and Christians from the very beginning of time that Daniel is the author of this book. Even though full authorship is not explicitly stated, but Daniel would obviously have been very capable of writing this book. Now, let's go on to verse 2. Daniel said this as his testimony. I was looking in the vision by night. Behold, 4 winds of the heaven were swirling up the great sea. And the 4 beasts were coming up from the sea, different from one another. The first beast was like a lion. It had wings of an eagle. I kept looking until its wings were plucked. It was lifted up from the ground, made to stand up on 2 feet like a man. The human mind was given to it. Now, let's try to understand what this vision means. The apocalyptic vision opens with a scene of a wind stirring up a stormy sea. The winds are just churning up the water in every direction. One might imagine ships being beaten and tossed about in this chaotic, turbulent storms. These winds blow across the sea every which way. Now, the angel in verse 17, because we do have a divine interpretation here. The angel in verse 17 explains to Daniel that these four great beasts are 4 kings or kingdoms. They come up from the sea. This term regularly used in scripture for the mass of peoples and nations of the earth. The nations of the earth are portrayed as that great turbulent sea of humanity, always in a state of unrest, chaos, and turmoil. For example, Isaiah 17, the uproar of many peoples who roar like a roaring of the seas, and the rumbling of nations who rush like the rumbling of mighty waters. John, the Apostle John, said, and I saw a beast coming up out of the sea. Again, he says, in the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. Again, we are also reminded from Psalm 2 that the nations are in an uproar. I mean, they are on a rampage. Notice here that anything coming from the sea would immediately be suspicious in the minds of ancient people. Now, the Great Sea, capital G and capital S, is physically what we call today the Mediterranean Sea, as in Joshua chapter 1, verse 4, when God says, from the wilderness in this Lebanon, even as far as a great river, the river Euphrates, and all the land of the Hittites, and as far as the great sea towards the setting of the sun will be your territory. But now the great sea here in Daniel 7 is symbolic of all humanity. And also that these great beasts also rise from the earth in verse 17, further supports the symbolic use of sea to represent the great pool of humanity, sinful humanity. Also, these beasts are different from one another. in that there are 4 different kingdoms, diverse in power, size, and authority. So these are not merely 4 successive kings for the same kingdom. Now, there is near unanimous agreement that these 4 kingdoms are Babylon, the dual kingdom of the Medes and Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans. And that these 4 kingdoms also comprise the 4 portions of the statue in Nebuchadnezzar's dream in Daniel chapter 2. But let's also note that Daniel does not identify any of these kingdoms explicitly in his account of this vision. Indeed, he seems to be more concerned about the identity and the activities of this coming king, that small horn, who originates from the 4th beast. Now, this first great beast is like a lion with the wings of an eagle. And this is identified with Babylon as also the head of gold in Daniel chapter 2. And again, that's to note that both the lion and the eagle symbolize Nebuchadnezzar elsewhere in the Bible. For example, Jeremiah chapter 4. A lion has come up from his thicket, and a destroyer of nations has set out. He has gone out from his place to make your land a waste. And he's speaking of Babylon. Jeremiah says this: Israel is a scattered flock. The lions have driven them away. The first one who devoured him was the king of Assyria. And this last one who had broken his bones is Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon.
Larry.
Yes.
Sorry, I put 2 questions in the chat box.
Yes.
So I don't know if I should wait until you're finished.
No, you may ask.
Okay, so the question I have is, the recent one is, so the beasts that are coming out of the Great Sea, are all these new kingdoms coming out of the Great Sea?
Well, yes, because the sea represents humanity, all the peoples of the earth. So all these kingdoms come from the sea. They come from the earth. That is, they come from this great sinful humanity.
Wait, but are we saying that these kingdoms that are going to arise, are they all coming from that area in the Mediterranean? Or like, are they coming from Greece and they're coming from Rome and they're coming from, like, is that what it's alluding to? Or is it just saying that the Great Sea is just, I'm trying to make the connection. Like,
Okay,
okay, go ahead.
Sure. The Great Sea is humanity. It's symbolic.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And then Habakkuk says they fly like an eagle, swooping down to devour. And he's speaking there of Babylon. And also, I was going to show you a picture of this, but there's actually in Babylon today something called the Line of Babylon. And this supposedly dates back to the time of Nebuchadnezzar, maybe even before. So Daniel would have seen this thing, but the Line of Babylon is a statue of a lion trampling upon a man. And it is among the most celebrated archaeological artifacts in Iraq. So if you go there, if you could go there, it's maybe not safe to go there now. But if you go there, you will actually see this very same thing that Daniel would certainly have seen. And also, Release of Lions actually decorated the outside walls of the royal palaces of Babylon and along the processional way leading through the Istar Gate. And there were carved winged lions decorating the city gates as well. So the lion and the eagle would be symbols that Daniel would have recognized because he saw these things every single day. Okay, now, letter number F. I kept looking until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And the human mind was also given to it. Now, this remainder of verse 4 isn't explicitly interpreted in the text, but we can conclude several features. One, Daniel probably would have concluded that this first beast is representative of Babylon. Because he would have seen all these figures of lions and winged lions throughout this great city of Babylon. And notice that the wings of the beast were plucked, and that indicates that this beast was under sovereign divine dominion. It had a leash, and God was holding that leash. Now that the wings of this beast were plucked indicates a demise of this beast is now more limited in power, less fearsome. This beast is nearing the end. It has less splendor. Because, by the time we get to Belshazzar, Babylon is in decline. It's not the Babylon of Nebuchadnezzar. And that the wings of this beast are now plucked indicates that Belshazzar could very well be the last monarch of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. And that this beast was lifted up from the ground and made to stand up on 2 feet like a man indicates approaching divine judgment. Because, a beast itself does not look up. It's been upon the ground. This beast, Babylon, is based upon its own agenda of conquering people. Now it's going to be lifted up to face judgment. And that a human mind was also given to this beast might be giving Daniel a preview of particular judgment upon King Belshazzar based on the king's own decision. The demise of this beast would be coinciding with the judgment upon the king. And let's just note that by this time of this vision, Daniel would have been aware that Cyrus is king of Persia. And around this time, the Persians and the Medes are fighting. So Daniel sees the Persians off on the horizon, and he sees Babylon in slow decline. So this vision probably gives Daniel the idea that Babylon will soon come to an end. Also, biblical imagery often appears in previous revelation. Same thing here. Consider the pre-exilic prophet Hosea speaking to the people of Israel, the northern kingdom, in the days prior to the Assyrian conquest. Hosea says this: "It is I who knew you in the wilderness and in the land of drought. But when they had grazed, they became full. When they were full, their heart was lifted up. Therefore they forgot me. So I will be to them like a lion, like a leopard I will lurk beside the way. I will fall upon them like a bear robbed of her cubs. I will tear open their breast. and there I would devour them like a lion, as a wild beast would rip them apart. He destroys you, O Israel, for you are against me, against your helper. So we see these same images in previous prophecy. Now let's go on to the second beast.
Wait, Luke, Larry, hold on. This is what I was thinking as you were reading about Jeremiah, is that Jeremiah was alive the time of Daniel, right? Or before Daniel? Jeremiah?
Jeremiah and Daniel are contemporaries.
Contemporaries. Okay.
But Jeremiah is older than Daniel.
Precisely, that's what I was thinking. So Daniel knew that because of God's wrath, Babylon took over Judea. Like, Babylon was used by God.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So let's go on to that second beast. Daniel says this in verse 5. Behold, another beast, a second one, resembling a bear. And it was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth. And thus they said to it, arise and devour much meat. Now Daniel is astonished by the appearance of a second beast, resembling a bear raised up on one side. Now I should say this, whenever you see in the NASV this word behold, that indicates the translator is give you something that is astonishing. Other translations may do something else, but Daniel is surprised. He's astonished. He is filled with wonder about this second beast. Now that the beast is larger on one side than on the other. I mean, now many see here the dual kingdom, the Medes and the Persians, with the Persians being the dominant one. So that's one interpretation. Although at this point, this beast is unnamed. So we actually don't technically know what the name of this beast is at this point. Or we can also say that the beast is pausing just long enough to devour a mouthful before springing up again on its next prey. So either of those two interpretations are used. I kind of favor number B, just because this beast is not named here. But now on letter B, note that even in this vision, the second beast is not identified. Not until chapter 8 do we see that the second beast references the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians, represented by the 2 horns of the ram in chapter 8. Now again, this beast has 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. So it's not just an ordinary bear. Now some see this as representing the conquest of the empire. That is, Persia conquered Lydia, Babylon, and Egypt. Yet this is also arbitrary because the Persians conquered other people groups as well. What is more probable is that this is just one more feature of its bestial essence. The mouth of this beastly bear is supported by ribs just like its chest. That is, it's an eating machine that just never tires. It eats just like it breathes. So this is quite a sight to behold. Now, the command "arise, devour much meat" is an emphatic divine decree. But even this fearsome beast is still under the leash and control of God. So that's the second beast. Now, this third beast, and we'll just have time for this third beast, and then tomorrow, and then next week, we'll pick up with that fourth beast. Daniel says this, after this, I kept looking, behold, another one, like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads. The dominion was given to it. So after this implies that these beasts come in a sequence. They're not simultaneous. And Daniel is astonished by this third beast having a resemblance of a leopard. But what a leopard this one is. It has 4 wings of a bird and 4 heads. And again, dominion was given to it, implies again, heaven maintains sovereignty over the nations. Now, a leopard is swift, but the 4 wings of the leopard's back increase its swiftness even more. Now let's just note, the Babylonians could be swift. The Persians could be swift, but the Greeks under Alexander the Great outdid them all. Alexander the Great invaded Asia Minor in 334 BC, and within 10 years had conquered the entire Persian Empire all the way to India. That this beast corresponds to the Greeks under Alexander is clear from the vision of Daniel chapter 8, which associates this beast with the shaggy goat. But again, in this vision, Daniel does not know this kingdom. And so next time, we will begin with verse 7 in that vision of that fourth beast, that one that is dreadful and terrifying, as if the other 3 were not dreadful and terrifying. But this one is going to outdo them all. Okay, so we are at the end of our time. I do want to point out that next week, if you saw the email sent out from Brian, there could be, there might be some changes, but we're going to meet next week at 9 o'clock, from 9 to 10:15. So please keep that in mind, but do pay attention to the email which is going to be sent out this week. That will confirm everything. Okay, are there any closing comments or questions?
Yeah, I had another question in the chat box. As far as you said, the Jewish had recordings of Daniel. Do you know what those actual documents are?
Do I know?
The actual documents, like, do you know the references that the Jewish people use?
Okay, are you referring to the documents in the intertestamental period?
Yeah, whatever they use. I don't know. I don't know what the Jewish people read to know about Daniel.
Well, there are some books of the Apocrypha.
Oh, okay.
That have this type of prophecy.
Okay.
Now it's not inspired, and the Jews never classified it as divine.
Elise, can I pipe in? Elise, did you
Yeah.
mean what copies they had to read about the book of Daniel?
No, not necessarily not necessarily the copies, but like, all right, so did they have actual copies of Daniel that they
Yeah.
read?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
And that was the major find because, like I said, they could look back. The copies that most Bibles base their Jewish text on, the Hebrew text, is from 1000 AD. And so when they found those copies, I mean, immediately found one another 1,000 years older.
Okay.
So it could verify whether they, in the text, that was the thing. They matched up really well.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Any further questions or comments? Well, I will close in prayer, and the worship service begins in about 15 minutes. Our Father, we thank you that you have revealed yourself to us through your word, which you gave to the prophets before us, and into the apostles for the church. And so, Father, help us to read and to delight in meditating upon your word, and help us, Father, to find what is in our life that we need to change, or what in our life in which we need to trust you. For Father, we see you sovereign over the nations, but even in this time, as we see our own nation in turmoil, do we trust you? Can we depend upon your promises? Of course we can. We can because we know you are faithful to all of your promises. Father, help us as we gather soon to worship, that our worship will be pleasing in your sight, that we will hear your word again and again, and that we will grow with each other in the grace, in the knowledge of Jesus Christ. And we thank you, Father, for the joy that you give to us, a joy that cannot be taken from us. And we love you, Father. Amen.
All right. Thanks for the class today. That was good.
Yeah,
Sure
thank
thing.
you.
Thank you so much, Larry. Thank you, Terry,
Thanks, Larry. See you
Carrie.
guys.